Hey, Uplando, for the second time today. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, yeah, good. Yeah, it's been good to see you. Really so appreciative. And one of the things that we love to have is staff members come in, and everything from customer support to community managers to others that come in and kind of give us an idea of what they do. But you have some very special information and announcements to share with us all here. We're taking questions in the Upland Cafe, but we'll let you get right into it, Idan. What can you tell us new?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we just put out these announcements, so I don't think I'll be just going over them one by one. But I'm happy for you, Uplando, to guide me through your questions, or if you want to kind of like cover, the interesting parts.
Sure, and I think one of the things that we have seen is on the economy. We've been let know now that percentage of the economy is going to start to take a change. Can you give us an idea of what came to that decision and where that's going to go in the future?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the primary, KPIs we're looking at is the velocity at which both Apex and USD are being exchanged between players inside the metaverse economy, and we've seen a steady growth in that across the years. But strikingly over the past couple of months, there's been this huge surge of activity, and this was the primary trigger. And we were kind of like, these announcements were a bit maybe long due, but we were waiting for the deployment of the first beta iteration of Metaventures as kind of like to symbolize that progression, that growth for us, kind of like turning the pages to the next chapter in the Uplands economy. So that was basically, these are the combined triggers for putting this step function move forward for us and the entire Upland economy.
Interesting, and as you had talked about, as you continue to put usher in these changes, some of the big things that we know. So cars, they talked about Meta Motors. How will block explorers be used in cars? How would they be driving it, or is there something else that is a new layer, a 3D layer, possibly coming to the world of Upland?
Yeah, so as you guys probably know, we are actively working on cars. So that includes everything from the NFT itself, which is going to be super elaborate, and hopefully it will become a standard for car NFTs across the entire metaverse and not just Upland. And beyond that, working on the utility side of it, so using cars as means of transportation inside of Upland. But then also actively working on car racing, which is also going to be the first time that people are going to see like Upland as an immersive experience and not just kind of like the map client that everybody's used to today. So these are all very exciting things. And part of cars is actually the driver aspect, that part of what makes this racing an interesting game to play. So it's not just about the car's abilities and the racetrack, which is plotted on top of the actual map, but it's also about the driver's skills. And this obviously raises kind of like the desire and the ability to allow players to hold multiple drivers and not just one. So if you want to have a driver that specializes in off-road racing, or one driver that maybe become an instructor to other drivers, etc., you want to allow players to be able to hold multiple drivers as NFTs. And rather than having a new NFT, we have made the decision to make block explorers into those driver NFTs. So block explorers are expected to have the ability to drive cars, especially in races, and be trained with specific capabilities and abilities towards racing.
It's interesting that you talk about the block explorers being drivers in the car. We've seen from the Series One NFTs from Upland that there are block explorers that are in that mythic range, and they, when brought in through the portal, they split, and now you have a new block explorer. There's some very interesting errata on the back of that card. Will that play a part in what the ability of block explorers can do? Is that a mechanic or utility on that block explorer?
No, so we see these as a kind of like a level playing field. So all block explorers will start the same regardless of their rarities. But then, it will be part of the lore, right? So you can imagine that an ultra rare block explorer that is specifically trained as a driver may be worth more than a very common block explorer that is trained the same way. But so these are all the kind of like the personal touches that make NFTs unique, right? right? You can have two NFTs that do exactly the same, have the same capabilities, but they may be precious in different way to different players. And rarities comes to play as part of that.
Very interesting. Moving along with some other good questions. This is good. I like this. So looking into properties that have oceanfront by the water, will there be piers that players can create? And is there boats in the new future since we're talking about moving things, vehicles?
Yeah, so the vision was always to have all means of transportations in Upland eventually, and that includes boats and aircraft as well. So as we do not have a very specific roadmap and plans for those, they are definitely going to be in Upland in the future.
Very good. Will we be able to offer multi-properties for another property? So say 3 properties for one properties, or how will that work in the future?
Absolutely. So, as you guys know, and we're making step-by-step progress. We try to do it, as fast as humanly possible. But we've recently introduced the ability to swap NFTs one for another. And we know currently this excludes the property NFT. And the primary reason is because all of our NFTs that we created beyond the property NFTs, they kind of like live up to a standard that we call UNFT, which is based on the DGOOD standard that was developed by the EOS community. And that makes it makes it easier for us to enable trading between those types of NFTs. So we've currently implemented so far the option to trade a UNFT for another UNFT and one for one. But there is absolutely plans on the roadmap to be able to bundle up NFTs together so you can swap multiple NFTs for multiple other NFTs. And that will also include in the future the upload token, so anything uploaded through the NFT portal, and eventually also properties themselves.
So you talked about the upload token, and that's very interesting because other people have speculated that there would be something like a live token that would be for an animate object as Spark is for inanimate objects. So are we going to see animals and plants and food and things coming into the metaverse?
Absolutely, and we've mentioned that before. There will be the plans are to have a token that's similar to Spark that is staked to create inanimate objects that sit on top of the map, such as structures and cars and outdoor decor, etc., and outdoor ornaments. There will be a similar token that is dedicated to create life, so plants or animals, etc. This is still the plan. Unfortunately, it is not yet on our immediate roadmap, but it is going to be there eventually.
Great. Player communities and neighborhoods.
Let me stop you for 1 second. Let me turn the mic. What are you most excited about the recent announcements?
Well, of course, the Block Explorer stores and the Metaventures in and of itself is what I'm really excited about. Being able to have players, we've seen that with the player created decor that came in Idan, that was incredibly successful. It's so good to see players being able to express themselves through creating their own type of ornaments. And again, the Block Explorers, yes, but I got to tell you, cars, Meta Motors, and knowing that we are going to be able to do that, specifically the drag racing and the off road, and then having dealerships and all that things. Cars are probably my most exciting because, like I said before, I would like an ice cream truck. I don't think that's one of the versions of vehicles or the type of vehicles they done, but we need ice cream trucks in the metaverse. I'm just saying.
Yeah, but I will say though we do have vans, so that's something you can absolutely go for, and we've been laying out slowly but surely infrastructure for a very innovative and a unique metaverse. And over the next, months and years, we're going to be connecting the dots. So you can imagine, for example, what does that look like, right? So imagine you said you wanted an ice cream truck, right? Imagine you buy a van, and maybe there's a Metaventure in the future that the sole purpose of them is creating skins for cars. So basically, like a car paint shop. So you can take your van that you purchased and create, and another player will design a paint shop that looks like an ice cream truck for you. And these kinds of interactions and economies are.
Oh, sorry about that. We'll get that muted.
No, this is fun.
Sorry. Yeah, no, it's the Meatbot came in and decided to be a DJ. Go ahead, Idan.
Yeah, So these types of dot connection would it just takes the sum of everything in Upland and just makes it into something complete, which is much bigger than each of the parts, and that's where we're going. We're trying to make small steps in that direction, each and every week, each and every month, going forward. So I think it's a really exciting future, and the net is going to get hit on the head once players actually see these things manifest in Upland. It's going to take time, but we are making progress towards that vision.
Well, it's evident that you're making progress. It's there's never a dull moment in Upland, and we look at this throughout the time that you have releases, information that come through. And one of the Ian, to answer your question, cars. People are absolutely enthralled by it and very excited. So we can't wait to see that ushered in. And did you say that was month of 2022? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
So you broke off for just 1 second.
Oh, I said, did you say that was the first part of 2022? The first couple of months the cars are coming in? I didn't quite catch it.
Yeah, so cars are going to be laid out over 2022, kind of like step by step. And the steps are going to be, again, we are currently working on a couple of things in parallel. One of them is the actual NFT, the car NFT. The other is a very important infrastructure to be able to stake Spark in order to create, untethered objects on top of the map in Upland. And that will serve both for cars, but also for outdoor decors and structure ornament shops that are going to be 100% player run. So this is a very important infrastructure piece that we're working on to be able to deploy, for us to be able to even start manufacturing cars. Because again, we want to hold ourselves as operators to the same standards that we hold everybody that participates in the metaverse. So when we start manufacturing Meta Motors cars, these are going to utilize those same mechanics where there's going to be a factory, and the factory is going to start producing these cars. So again, some infrastructure that needs to go in place before even cars can start appearing in the metaverse. And then in parallel, we're also working on the racing project. And I can tell you that we've already kicked off this project. This is going to be a separate client. It's going to be done in Unity and not kind of like in our current WebGL technologies. It's a very exciting project. We still don't have hard dates or timelines. We hope to be able to kind of like offer a couple of sneak peeks as we progress with this project. But again, as I mentioned, this is going to be the first time where players are going to be able to experience Upland as an immersive experience. Like, so you can imagine different camera points, and following a race inside of the Upland metaverse in any plottable track in the map inside open cities, where you actually see all the buildings that have been built in Upland, including their outdoor decors or their structure ornaments on top of them. So again, basically the first truly immersive experience that is gonna manifest in Upland is gonna be tied to car racing. And again, no hard dates yet, but we promise to keep you up to date as we make progress.
And some of the people have been speculating, we've all been speculating as to what will power these vehicles. TM has a tandem bicycle that he likes to ride people around with, but what do you have in store for what will power these vehicles?
Yeah, so the current thought is that Spark will power those vehicles. So, similar to the concept of today you have either electric or gas vehicles, and you need to either charge them or put gas into them. The same concept is going to be utilized via Spark. So a car would have, part of the NFT would be tracking not just odometer, but its current charge, whether the metaphor is a gas engine or an electric engine. But then the requirement once that charge is depleted, you'd have to recharge it using Spark.
Interesting. And so the Spark is the renewable resources. When you go and you actually build a structure, you get the Spark back. Will you be depleting Spark as a means of fuel to make the car go, or will it be renewable again?
It will still follow the same concept of staking Spark in favor of charging your vehicles.
Fantastic. And we've heard before rumblings about being able to Spark mine or Spark farm. Are those mechanics that will be in the game?
Again, these are on the more distant roadmap, so not yet on the immediate roadmap.
Fair enough. So something that is on the roadmap is player communities and neighborhoods that require. They said at first 500 members, and many neighborhoods may not be able to make that total number. How do you see that progressing in the future?
Sorry, Upland, you broke off for me. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, how is that the 500 player communities? We have the directory that's coming into play, and those player communities in neighborhoods that require at least 500 people in a single neighborhood. How will that kind of change, and what will happen with these player neighborhood scores or the neighborhood scores that could evolve into potentially a new collection?
Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly where the 500 number came from, but yeah, the neighborhood-based collections are still kind of like on our roadmap. Again, we do not have yet times or ETAs for you guys, but definitely still as we communicated in the past.
And for those current places in Upland that are like current racetracks and drag strips, will those be used for the vehicles, or is it we build them? Will we be building racetracks? Will we be building off-road tracks?
Yeah, so we'll have much more information, as we, are ready to put it out there. I would say to you, let me just paint the picture, right? The beautiful thing about Upland is that it's mapped to the real world, as everybody knows. And one of the perfect things is that you can take any road, any street, any highway, and any kind of like, GeoJSON drawable, path on top of or laid on top of the real world and make it into a racing track. And this is something unique you can't find in any other game, right? Imagine that for a second, just because of the fact that Upland is laid on top of the real world. So you can start to imagine that basically any street, any place in the world can become a racetrack for that intended purpose. So there may be distinctions between kind of like the official racetracks versus kind of like user-generated racetracks. But any path basically on top of the world can potentially become a racetrack.
That's awesome. It sounds like a lot of fun. I can't wait. This is one of my favorite things in the game so far as it's been described. We've seen some of the yield percentages being announced in the information today. Can you tell us a little bit more about the reduction and over time how that will work?
Absolutely, and again, this concept dates back to the very earliest days of Upland with our white paper, where when we started Upland, the earnings were set based on a model that we've devised with together with some mathematicians that worked with us on kind of like the initial economy model, and the reason for this level of earnings was basically one, and it is to kickstart an economy, to incentivize people to join the economy. But we always knew this level of earnings, they are not sustainable where you're thinking about real world economies in the long term. Imagine for a second that the US interest rate for the dollar would be 17%. That's unimaginable, correct? Right? It's just, it would just lead to hyperinflation at the end of the day. So we've always made sure that we communicated that, forward thinking, that level of earnings is probably meant to be decreased. And when are we able to decrease that is when that monetary velocity starts picking up, and then the economy gets sparked with a life of its own and is almost made or is starting to go to the path of being self-sustainable. At that point, the economy does no longer need to rely on subsidies such as these levels of earnings, and this is where the earnings start to go down. But as you know, today with real economies, usually you would have a central bank, and that central bank is responsible for the monetary policy, and they may make adjustments either on a monthly, quarterly, yearly basis, driving interest rates or earnings either up or down. So as we imagine that these earnings are probably on the long term will go down from where they are right now, at some points they will settle, and then they will start to adjust per the incentives that are kind of like meant to be in response for current economic activity. So at some points you want to stimulate the economy, and at other points you want to create incentives for other people to join, etc. So this is going to be an adjustable, moving kind of like macroeconomic parameter for the entire Upland economy. And more than that, and again, we've said that also at the earlier stages in the white paper already, that our grand vision is to be able to delegate that responsibility to an independent party, such as a central bank, that kind of like acts, that the main mission for that body is to support and basically to be accountable for the health of the economy. So up until now, and kind of like in the foreseeable future, we as the Upland operators assume that role, but hopefully in the future we'll be able to delegate that out to an independent party. And the primary reason for that is not just for the health of the economy, but also to just strengthen the notion of the trust that every stakeholder has in the economy.
Yeah, it's again fascinating, all the behind the scenes that go into prepping all these things. And I know people appreciate that and what you guys are doing in your team. So much appreciation for the hours and hours and hours spent on the development. One of the things that you talked about, we got revealed to us, is Spark weekly logins. And that part, not only just the login part of it, but the Spark Exchange. Can you tell us a little bit more about the logging in rewards, and then when might the Spark Exchange go live?
Yeah, so taking a bit of step back, so today, up until today, the primary means for us to incentivize, participation, engagement in Upland was primarily Apex, using Apex rewards. We've seen over the past couple of months that we started using Spark like in places like treasure hunts and competitions, and that was I think it was a healthy and good thing. It relieved a bit the pressure from Apex being used as the sole means of incentive, but it was also very competitive, right? Being a treasure hunt or a very either a treasure hunt or a sweepstake or some kind of like a competition where you were competing against other players. We want to start also giving the super engaged players the route to start accumulating some Spark by means of engagement itself. And again, it's not going to be substantial amounts of Spark. It may be variable, it may be adjusted from time to time, but again, we want to start incentivizing players to kind of like interact with Upland on a daily basis, not just for the sake of being able to fulfill the full potential of their Apex rewards, but also on top of that, have some access to Spark tokens that would allow them to start building, even if it's small, right? But still, if you are very, very engaged, we want to create that pathway for you to get Spark, albeit in a way that is responsible and cognizant of the Spark economy, making sure that there's no overflooding of supply, etc.
Yeah, we've seen the landscape of Upland change so drastically because of the structures that have been being built by players. And one of the questions is, what will the utility be? We've seen ornaments, but is there renting going to be coming in for these structures, as in renting your structure out? Or what is the future mechanics for structures?
Yeah, I can say that there are several mechanics, on the plate that have to do with both, not just the renting of NFTs for utility, but also joint ownership, which is something that is very, very much on our minds. So all of these things are in play. They are a bit behind the scene. We have not communicated information about that yet, nor timelines, but they are absolutely a part of our grand vision. So again, this is, just imagine, when we think about things, we think about equivalent to the real world. When you own something, there is absolutely no reason in the world why you wouldn't be able to rent it to somebody who wants to use it and is willing to pay you. So for us, that's a no-brainer. Again, like everything else, we need to get there. We need to craft a vision, create the technical specifications, come up with a good model behind it, and then execute and deliver it. All of these things take time. Again, if you look at Upland today, you can start identifying almost mini companies within the metaverse, right? Like the whole concept of cars can be an entire company, right? The whole concept of Metaventures can be an entire company. So these things, as they become more elaborate, they require more and more attention. The system becomes more and more robust, but also more complicated. But at the same time, also the Upland team is growing. So today we have a much bigger developer team, and that is expected to grow as well. We have a lot more resources following our Series A funding. and in the future probably there's more news to come. So again, that growth just enables us to pursue our vision in multiple directions at the same time. Hopefully in 2022, we're going to be seeing some really fascinating developments and kind of like, how the entire metaverse starts to play out. And again, how all of these dots are starting to get connected. And once they are connected, it will be much easier for every stakeholder to just understand the massive opportunity and what this thing can become. Again, once all of us kind of like realize the vision and work together towards like, as a community towards like something that's just bigger than life.
Idan, somebody had asked me today, what would be my favorite international city to be open in Upland? So Idan, what would be your favorite international city to be open in Upland?
Oh, favorite. Whenever I think about favorite international locations, my mind always goes to Italy for some reason, because it's one of my favorite countries. But again, we do not have yet, we have a couple of candidates for international cities. The first international launch will be a very, very special one. But we also want to make sure that we keep the agile mind, because as we demonstrated with our partnership earlier this year with the NFL Player Association, there are some life-changing events in the metaverse that cause us to change track. So you can imagine that also with international location, there may be some elements in play that affect the decision, what is going to be the first one. And, brand partnerships may be a part of that reasoning. And I don't want to say too much, but again, I think that the keeping of that agile mind is very helpful when when we are kind of like as operators steering that ship of development and kind of like the expansion and just the growth of the entire metaverse. Hopefully, I don't know, is it going to take 5 years, 10 years? Who knows? Hopefully, all of the world is open eventually in Upland.
Yeah, and it's again, people imagining that long-term vision of what you might have coming up for us, but we know that you're in the laboratory brewing stuff up new for all of us to experiment with. One of the things that I saw that was very interesting is UpX transfers. And if you could go a little bit more into that, is that going to be something that comes into the game, that player-to-player transfers of UpX?
Yeah, and again, the primary reason for this is that we are priming the economy to allow for services to be exchanged between players. We've seen that a bit with the user-generated content contests that we're running. And we're going to start seeing it now also with Metaventures, but also, things like cars. Imagine for a second, cars are not just meant for driving. They have certain attributes such as the ability to carry passengers or cargo between locations in Upland. And that starts bringing the fact, and this together with Metaventures, together with user-generated content, brings the fact that we are going to be in a situation, I think we already are, but it's just going to get magnified, where Uplanders are going to start offering services to other Uplanders, and we have to be able to allow the means for Uplanders to compensate each other within the Upland ecosystem. And the most natural way to do it is with UpX, which is basically the value carrier inside Upland today as a utility token. And I think this is the primary reasoning to think about this. When we look at that, we see that, there is, the best route is to allow that to happen. Now, obviously, there needs to be some restrictions accompanied. So, for example, we need to make sure that both parties on the sending and the receiving ends are KYC'd, so we know there's a real person behind each account. So we need to make sure that also when making these types of transactions, the community pool still gets 5% from each party as other marketplace transactions. And there may be some other restrictions put in place just to make sure that there's no fraudulent activity associated with these types of transactions. But the grand vision, again, is just to allow players to exchange value between themselves when offering services. So let's say if you are, very, creative and, and a smart and savvy, player, and you want to participate in one of these creative challenges that we put in place, or you want to run, let's say an outdoor decor shop, but you don't have the creative skills, right? Why would you not be able to then onboard another Uplander who has those creative skills and pay them in Apex to create those designs for you, right? So these are very intuitive, natural means for players to interact within the metaverse, and we want to make sure that we are prepared to be enablers of these types of value exchanges, which are perfectly valid and perfectly called for in a metaverse economy.
Yeah, I love it. I think that's a great idea. And many of the players here have shown their skills on what they can do on the ornaments. Will you continue to take player submitted designs for potential new structures in Upland? Is that something that's on the roadmap?
Yeah, so we have several ways for user-generated designs to make it to Upland, and as you probably noticed, we don't have a pipeline that we roll out for new structures. At the end of the day, the grand vision is this would fall under the responsibilities of Uplanders. And these are going to be allowed through different mechanics. Some of them are Metaventure in base. Some of them has to do with mimicking the real world. And others may be associated with neighborhood governance schemes. So again, I think we've mentioned it in the past. I don't have a lot of more information to give you, but I can definitely tell you that the vision at the end of the day, again, and this comes from the realization that, it's just a game of numbers, right? In the Upland community, there are many more creative people, many times more the creative people than we can ever onboard as members of the team in Upland. And we want to empower this creative power and not necessarily take the sole ownership of kind of like plotting out any creative aspect in Upland. So this is the vision. I would say though that as we are going to the pathway of delegating more and more of the creative power to the Upland stakeholders, we do still want to maintain a very coherent visual state of Upland. And that means that every user-generated creation will need to go through an approval process by the Upland team. But again, this is going to be something that is going to be, we're going to perfect that to an art, and it's eventually, maybe it's going to start out slow, but it's going to be perfected into something that runs very smoothly. But at the end of the day, the idea is to empower endless amount of creators to cast value into the Upland metaverse, which is just beneficial for everybody.
Yeah, and I like all the things that are coming to Upland, the decor, the vehicles, things of that nature. What will Upland have to do in order to keep all these assets going alive and well, and keep all the minting so that there's no errors and things of that nature? What is the behind the scenes that we don't see, Don, that makes all of this tick?
So again, it's a number of things. I think one of them is the ability to recruit new players. And these are done through organic means. These are done also through marketing efforts that the Upland team makes. And it's very great for the growth period, for the growth phase. And this also requires, as players come on board, to releasing of new cities, new content. We're now running into a point where we're starting to be very tight on kind of like FSA starter properties. So, again, these are adjustments that we make as we grow, just to make sure that there's a balance between supply and demand. And this is exactly what it is, because again, when, there are going to be times where the growth in Upland stagnates, and there are going to be times where the growth in Uplands, exponentially goes up, and we will react as operators to those states. So if the economy is stagnating, you're not going to see a lot of new city releases, whereas the economy is growing, Everything is going to be done in support of that. And as basically the metaverse grows, you're going to start seeing more and more activities happen inside the cities through things like Metaventures and car racing, and the NFT portal. And you're going to see, you're going to start seeing assets being brought into Upland because where else can you trade your Formula One racer, for a CryptoKitty, right? Like these are things that the world has yet to see. So again, I'm rambling on, but I hope I answered your question there, Uplando.
No, you did, and it's good. And again, these are all questions that everybody has on their minds that we talk about on a constant basis. Speaking of the Metaventures, when will the next Metaventure category be released? Could you give us any detail on that? I mean, we've seen possible cafes, we've seen other possible means of business. Do you have something in that category that you can tell us about?
Absolutely. I can give you, again, the framework that we are looking at it. So first of all, again, as our development team grows, there are going to be people that are dedicated to the constant advancements that we make with Metaventures. The one cool thing is that, once we launch Block Explorer shops, so this is basically a secondary market for a UNFT, right? So you can imagine that some low-hanging fruits are going to be things like NFLPA legit shops, or just general legit shops, or structure ornament shops, etc. So anything that is a UNFT, anything that follows the DGood standard, is a very low-hanging fruit for us to create a MetaVenture for as a secondary market. In parallel, as I mentioned, we're working on mechanics that would allow players to stake Spark in order for the construction of inanimate objects other than buildings. And this is basically the preset for things like outdoor decor shops or outdoor ornament shops, where players can not just resell on a secondary market, but also actually make their creations, make their NFTs, use Spark as kind of like to create manufacturing lines of NFTs, and the market will be the judge of whether or not they are, they see it as worth spending their OPEX on or not. And this is, this is the nature of an open economy. So again, this is the framework we're thinking about. There are some very low-hanging fruit in secondary market shops for UNFTs. There are going to be some, for us to cast one of the first utilities to upload tokens. And again, part of the reason why we haven't yet expanded the NFT portal to include anything other than the Upland blockchain hero cards, collectibles on Wax, was the fact that we are waiting to have utility first, to have the reason why you would even want to bring it in the first place. And one of these reasons are going to be just the fact that you are able to create Metaventures that trade in uploaded content. And once that's live, again, you're going to see more and more NFT portal integrations with places like Ethereum and Flow and Polygon and what have you. So these are kind of like the steps. So definitely expect secondary markets for UNFTs. Definitely expect over the next months updates about outdoor decor shops, which is the second part of the Metaventures beta. And then definitely expect everything that we mentioned, such as cafes and other Metaventures further down the road.
I love that there is going to be more player in activity in the Metaventure space. I really love that. One thing that there's a lot of questions being asked is the 17%, the lowering of the earnings. Is there any possibility that you would keep the earnings for grandfathered in anything that's been minted, and then at a certain point you reduce for everything that's new? Or is this always going to be a staggered down, continual lowering of that percentage rate return for the returns on properties?
Yeah. So again,
If that makes sense.
I'll just reiterate that these are macroeconomic decisions that are being made in support of the economy, and they can go either way. So while I can't tell you what is going to be the next change and when, I can tell you that, for the very limited understanding that I personally have in macroeconomy, my expectation is still that that value over time will go down. Now, I can't tell you exactly where is it going to settle on, and I can't tell you if it's going to stay there. But again, these are not predetermined things. These are just basic economic principles. When you envision a functioning, fully blown economies that has millions of participants that exchange value between themselves each and every day for different purposes, then you can imagine that those subsidiaries, those incentives, should probably go down over time. So again, go ahead.
No. Go ahead, Idan. Go ahead, Idan.
No. So I'm saying again. So the net of this question is again, we can't foresee the future. We can only design systems that have components which allow us to react and pull different levers to support the economy as it goes through its different stages. So as I cannot tell you exactly when and what is the value or what is kind of like the homeostasis state of an incentive, then I can kind of like give you the vision and the reasoning why I would think that this value may come down.
Yeah, one of the things that would otherwise, some things that bring it down, player economy, bringing things in and having players, support the economy in game. What would otherwise being the beautification of a structure, a home that you have? Everybody had a blue square that they were purchasing of land, and now they're putting structures on them. Will these other decor pieces actually modify the UPEX or the overall value of a structure, a home, or the property?
So again, these are not basically mechanics that are integrated into the economy. So what I'm trying to say is the fact that you have a building doesn't automatically make its value higher, but you could expect. Again, this is all based on market perception, right? And for a property to have a building on it, somebody had to have access to Spark, and they had to stake it for a certain amount of time, which basically you can translate into monetary investment. So you can imagine that if you have two similar properties, that one of them has a structure and one of them doesn't, you can imagine why the market would price the property with a structure at a higher value compared to the one without. You could also imagine maybe you have similar structure, but the other one has some kind of a real world significance that compared to the other one, and that could be then different. So again, this is very similar to how real economies in the real world works. If you have a property in the real world and it has some old ugly building that nobody wants to live in, maybe the fact that it has that building on it is not very lucrative. So again, my point is at the end of the day that these are not like economic principles that are forced on the economy by us saying that, hey, if there's a structure, you have to pay a premium on the secondary market. No, this is for the market to determine what is the value of that addition or that enhancement to the property. I hope that makes sense.
Gotcha. It does, and I wondered if the Series 1 NFTs you had from that you released on Wax, would those in any way, shape, or form modify something else in the game? Do they have utility beyond what they are as artwork?
Well, as artwork, for sure, but this is similar to any other NFT that you may import through the NFT portal. So again, we are going to have in-home experiences in Upland, and as you know, each structure has like a living units associated, a number of living units associated with it. So, for example, a ranch house I think has one, whereas an apartment building, if I'm not mistaken, it's 8. But don't catch me on the number. So, at the end of the day, players are going to be able to own multiple houses or apartments. They are going to have inner spaces in them that they themselves, but also other players, can walk into and explore. And in those spaces, you'll be able to basically use your NFTs as decorations. So any two-dimensional NFTs, you would be able to, for example, hang on walls. And any three-dimensional NFTs, such as, for example, Upland Legits, you'll be able to just place them on the 3D space of your inner house or apartment. And then, you can then imagine how that progresses on. Like, these objects in your apartment can become points of discussion. So you can imagine, again, Upland, we have 3 concepts: play, earn, connect. And the reality today is that connect happens primarily outside of the game. But as we bring this pillar into Upland, you're going to see, for example, you'll be able to walk into somebody's home, and then the NFTs in that home, they serve as context of discussion. So maybe you want to talk about that discussion. Maybe somebody wants to compliment you on your NFTs that you show at home. Maybe somebody wants to ask you a question, and then, depending on your answer, maybe they'll make you an offer or have some kind of deal to trade you for it. So at the end of the day, Upland inner homes both will serve as casting further utility to structure, but also means for Uplanders to express themselves through NFTs in the metaverse.
Yeah, that's exciting. I can't wait to bring some of the artwork in and show it off, and other chains, other NFTs that I have, to bring it in to kind of express artistically on the wall. That'd be very cool. I really like that, and the discussions I like. We have seen the NFLPA ushered in and the legits that you have there, and wanting to know more and more about the signatures, being able to interact with potentially players and things of that nature. And on a second part of that question is, what's the next sport coming to Upland, Idan?
Okay, so let's start from the beginning. With signatures, so as we've communicated, every NFLPA legit will have the ability to be signed by its respective player digitally and as part of the NFT. And there are going to be some great gamification elements around that. And this is a segue, like you mentioned, and I don't want to say too much, but our partnership with the NFL Player Association is at its very early stages. As you know, it's only 2 weeks ago that we released the first gamification element in the form of being able to mint mementos in the primary markets in those stadiums in different cities, and we are going to be seeing more exciting stuff. And again, I don't want to mention anything before it's made officially public, but I can say this is just the beginning. So if you guys are excited about NFLPA legits right now, I think there's room for a lot more excitement to be had once you see how this product evolves.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see what you have Intel in store for us in terms of other sports coming into Upland. But what about music? I know you're a big music fan. I know you're a musician. What would be the next solution that you see? Is that going to be in metaverse concerts, or how would that work? Tell us more about it.
Yeah, so there's it's a broad subject, and you can think about, first of all, music itself, how it manifests in Upland, and you can imagine, for example, maybe cafes, and maybe as the cafe owner, you can bring in a DJ or be the DJ and stream music. That is one possibility. And then the other aspect is musicians, and the way we look at musicians. And again, going back, the whole Upland Legits concept was meant to be able to support different types of brands or personas, such as athletes and, for example, maybe musicians. So you can imagine a future where a celebrity musician may come into Upland and utilize it as a platform to start spinning off their own legits. And have kind of like the same form of gamification as you would expect to see in NFLPA, in our NFLPA partnership, albeit not related to actual sports, but maybe related to a concert that musician has played. As you can imagine, things like mementos versus kind of like the essentials equivalents. So again, these are things we've been thinking about very hard, and Upland Legits was a suite of products that was envisioned to be able to serve a multitude and then diverse range of potential partnerships that Upland has as operators with either brands, personas, athletes, etc.
I like it. I think it's very cool that we'll have access to those partners that you're currently building, and have maybe access to the IP that they hold and bring that into different parts of the Metaventures that are coming. I know we're getting close on time here, Idan, but what is the thing that otherwise in the month of January that you're most excited about? Or is there something in the first quarter of 22? Can't you tell us a little bit? Cross the line, Idan. Come on, tell us something, just a little bit.
So, I mean, if you want to go that granular, I would defer you to our public roadmap. That has basically, most of the things that we're working on. And again, January is basically, the day after tomorrow, right? Or so. So that's a bit short term. I can tell you that we have a lot of things that get us excited over the course of 2022. But the most exciting thing for me and for us is that we're no longer going to be moving in serial as we've been kind of like in the past couple of years. Sorry, one sec. Siri is bothering me here. We're going to be starting to move in parallel in different aspects that we have identified as pillars in the metaverse. And these are things like, again, just the overall metaverse mechanics, Metaventures as a pillar, third-party developer, tools as a pillar, cars and transportation as a pillar, the NFT portal as a pillar, et cetera, and there are more. And you can get kind of like the direction of where we're going with that through the way we've structured our roadmap that we share with the community. And you can start seeing these are the identified paths that we want to make constant progress in. And again, it's going to take us a bit of time to hit the groove there, but it will happen as we have a robust business, a functioning business, we have the resources, we have the growth we need to support all of these things to happen. And you're going to start seeing that actually happen. And this is the thing that excites me most. Just the rate of potential exponential growth we'll be able to hit once everything is grooving.
Yeah, I think I don't know if you ever, when you were creating the Upland, think that this would be the speed at which the adoption would happen, or has this exceeded your expectations?
So it's a great question. I think and it depends on when you may have asked me that question, right? If you asked me that, 3.5 years ago, we were just sitting in a room and just brainstorming and putting, slide decks together to convince crazy people that they should invest in Upland, right? I may have given you a different answer than I would today. I think for us, it's a very humbling experience. And you asked me what I personally think about it, but it's not just myself. We are now a team of something like 85 brilliant individuals. And, that's one of the things I'm most proud of is just the type of team we've put together. And just seeing everybody's buy-in, not just from the community, but also from the actual team that works, day and night for Upland. And I can tell you, I've never seen this, but all of us are working our asses off. And this comes usually when you have such a high conviction in what you're doing and such a high expectation that what we're doing is actually, we're helping define an industry. We're really helping kind of like create things that have never been done before. And I think you can see that in everybody's excited faces when they show up to work, either on Zoom or in person. But you definitely see that. And, I wish I was able to convey 10% of that excitement to the community because, again, this is something, I wish everybody, listening to having experienced that at some point in their lifetime, working with such a team on such a, cool project and making these advancements.
Yeah, every day collaborating with your team and watching and having those people come on, I'm sure the excitement is great. And there's things on the whiteboard that we just don't see. And one of the things that a lot of players concerned with is the stability of apps, the stability of mechanics in the game. I think that there's so much that goes into that, Idan, and I just wanted to maybe have you touch on it. The level of difficulty to make everything work so that the player experience is seamless. There's always going to be a little something. You are an open beta. When do you think you'll progress to the next stage of what's after open beta?
It's a great question. I think what would happen is eventually we'll graduate from Upland being in open beta in its entirety to having specific places of beta. So you can imagine even if Upland went out of beta, the day we launch maybe car races, that feature would still be in beta. So again, this is not like a normal game or a normal system where you have a very linear and a specific use case and user flow. And at some point you perfect that and you can say, you know what, I'm a grown-up product. Like every day there is a new pathway, there's a new something in Upland that almost like resembles an entire independent company or an independent business line, right? And those things, we've taken the path of doing whatever we can to deliver minimum viable products to the Upland metaverse, just for the sake of starting to iterate on it, starting to see how is it received by players. Is it working? Is the model behind it? Is the mathematical model behind it? Did we get it right? Do we need to make tweaks? And that's why we constantly need to iterate, even as we introduce new feature. My point is that at the end of the day, Upland will be like this living creature. It will never be, like something like most games today, where it's a very, very, very specific pathway, very, very specific use case that just keeps getting improved and better. These are going to be multiple different aspects that are being, each one of them going in their own direction, developing in their own way. So again, you ask, when are we going to go out of beta? Probably not never, right? So there's always going to be a beta element, just because we're going to keep casting more and more features and more innovation into this product. There's always going to be some beta element going on in Upland. And Upland as a whole, when are we going to remove the beta tag from Upland as a metaverse? I have no insight to that. But again, even when that happens, there are definitely going to be some elements in the game that are constantly going to be introduced as beta.
Sure. And we're excited to have those mechanics brought into the game. A couple things before you take off, Idan. And again, Idan, I want to thank you and the team for taking out time of your day to come into the Otherwise Players Lounge at Upland Cafe. It's a real thrill to have you here. And I can tell you, there are so many base of the players that are very excited about what's coming with Metaventures, with the vehicles, music, or any of those types of things that are coming into the game and types of utility and mechanics. It's very, very exciting to watch this grow from when you start. I mean, you would have cities that would sit unminted, and now you're minting cities in literally in an hour, which has to be staggeringly and overwhelmingly exciting for you. It's counter to what we're doing, which is all in a metaverse. But potentially there will be someday where you have an Upland convention or something of that nature. Can we expect something like that in 2022? Will we actually meet each other in real life, Idan?
Absolutely, yes. And, everybody's familiar, I'm assuming, with the term Genesis Week, so expect some news about that. Hopefully, conditions will allow it to be in person. We can't, we live in crazy times, we can't really tell. But we have always big plans for Genesis Weeks, and as Upland becomes bigger, Genesis Week is going to become bigger and bigger.
So, having said that, this is a global game, and I'll have one more question after this. But will there be different times for the opening of minting of cities to adjust for international play?
That's a great question. Again, for us, opening cities requires a coordination of multiple time zones. I definitely want to take that feedback and find ways for us to do so. I think as we mature and as we at least, string together, 4 or 5, very smooth releases, that would increase our confidence in being able to provide more time zones for the release.
Great, it's fantastic. Is there anything, Idan, that you want to leave us with? Again, with all that you know and everything that you've told us here today, which is a great wealth of information, that you just personally or for the team?
I just want to wish everybody a happy new year, and again, we need to take everything that we do very humbly and with a grain of salt. Again, the world is is a bit of a crazy place in our times, and I just want to wish everybody nothing but health and prosperity, and hopefully 2022 would be a successful year for everyone.
Well, I wish you the same for a happy new year, and you and the entire team. Greatly appreciative of your time that you spent with us here today and answering these questions. I know that many of you had so much more, so many more questions, but thank you for doing this. Thank you, Idan. Thank you, the Upland team. It's been a real pleasure to have you here.
All right, and thank you, Uplando, for running the show here in the Upland Cafe and, all the great work that you do for the community. So really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have a good afternoon.